Welcome everyone to another session for answer writing program. As you know that Vajiram and Ravi have initiated daily answer writing program where 2 questions of static and 1 current affair questions are uploaded on the portal. For the same you can write the answer and get evaluated on the same day. So let's start with today's session. In today's session we are going to talk about GS2 social justice, which will be catering with respect to issues related to development and management of social sector services related to health, education and human resources. We will be also talking about issues related to poverty and hunger. Now let us see those questions. The very first question we are going to deal with is going to be talking about urban poor. We have witnessed that how poverty is one of the crucial social issue in India. We have definitely seen how rural poverty is the majority of the concentrated zone. However, urban poverty is also impacting India's overall poverty scenario. So we'll be talking about urban poor. Then we'll be talking about rural healthcare system. As we have seen that there are multiple schemes with respect to national rural health safeguards and all. But despite that, there are certain gaps, and for the same we need to have certain remedial measures. So we will be talking about rural health. And the last current affair question, we will be talking about Indo-Canadian ties, what is the past and what are the recent events that we have witnessed. So we will be analyzing Indo-Canadian relations. So now let us see the very first question. To effectively address poverty, the welfare of urban poor cannot be an afterthought in policy making. Discuss. We have seen that how poverty is one of the biggest issue of Indian society, and we have seen how rural poverty is also one of the biggest contributor, but urban poverty is also substantial. In the introduction, we can substantiate the same through data points. We have seen that how multidimensional poverty index mentioned that India was managed to pull out 42 crore population out of poverty zone in the last 15 years. Now that's definitely a lot of shrinking of poverty. But we have seen also that yes, rural poverty has shrinked a lot, but urban poverty data says a story that the elimination is at a slower pace. So that's why we need to ensure that we are effectively addressing the poverty of urban areas. So you can start with the data point. In the body, you can talk about why there is need to address urban poverty. Firstly, we will talk about rising population. As we have seen various reports which says that by 2030, 40% of the India's population will be residing in urban areas. And now because of such kind of migration related issues and all, urban poverty will become a bigger issue. So we must ensure presently that we have certain policy mechanisms in place. Apart from that, urban places are also very crucial with respect to attracting investment. So they must ensure different kind of holistic development for the entire urban spaces. So whatever investment is coming, that can translate into inclusive growth. Apart from that, we have seen due to inequality, there is sense of relative deprivation. In urban areas, and that definitely leads to anomic behaviors and it increases the crime rate. We have also seen pressure on infrastructure. We have seen proliferation of urban sprawls, slums, and they directly impact access to various basic needs, and thus it perpetuates into urban poverty. Apart from that, we have also seen policy failure because lack of inclusive policies. Due to certain kind of discrimination and exclusion that most of the poor population in the urban areas faces, we have certain policy mismatch. So that because of such factors, there is need to address urban poverty. Now let us see what are the measures possible to ensure we eliminate urban poverty? The very first thing we need to ensure is integrated approach. Over here, we have seen that poverty is multidimensional. Thus, we must ensure we are not just helping them in economic terms, but also social and political empowerment must be done. When we are talking about social, we are talking about health, education, employment. If we are talking about political, we are talking about affirmative action at local bodies. So, such kind of multidimensional approach in an integrated way must be established. Apart from that, we have seen certain kind of employment guarantee schemes in rural places like MG Narega. Similarly, on the same line, there must be certain policies with respect to urban employment guarantee schemes. So, like schemes must be there for urban places. We have also seen how reforming local bodies, as in decentralization, can also empower urban local bodies, which can create structures and reforms to make sure that whatever gap is there with respect to welfare schemes and all, that can be fulfilled. We have also seen how making better infrastructures like health infrastructure, social, other different kind of social infrastructure can help with respect to elimination of urban poverty. You can talk about sanitation, you can talk about access of water. So, these are various kind of factors which can come under better infrastructure. You can also talk about housing and all, right. So, that is better infrastructure. And the last is regional development. We have seen that proliferation of urbanization is because of lots of push and pull factors. Now, migration, which is basically if we see that lot of rural population migrates to urban population, and such kind of migration happens because of certain kind of economic dependency a certain kind of economic dependency at urban places. If we create holistic development plans where rural population also get they also get their pie with respect to economic empowerment, they will be not migrating to urban centers. So, such kind of unwanted migration can be halted, and through regional development we can address in a very structured way. So, that is it for the measures. In the conclusion, you have the possibilities to write either government initiatives that are already in place with respect to urban poverty like Amrut, Jan Jeevan Mission, which talks about water. You can also talk about Antodaya Yojana, which is about employment and livelihood, or Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, as in housing for all, infrastructure. Or you can talk about multiple SDGs, as this is related to poverty, inequality, reducing inequality. Also SDG 11, which is talking about sustainable cities and communities, and also you can talk about sanitation. So, all these SDGs can be inculcated in the conclusion as well. Now, let us see the model answer and understand how we can use the same in the answer. First, you can talk about there are certain issues, certain factors leading to urbanization and subsequent urban poverty. Then you can talk about the need. You can give multiple points, you can give keywords and then substantiate, and then give examples or any data to make the point very relevant. So, that is how you can use your answers. You can also talk about the measures, and at the end, by government you can either inculcate through a separate body, or you can talk about the same in the conclusion. So, that is it for the question number 1. Now, let us move to the question number 2. The National Rural Health Mission envisaged architectural correction of rural healthcare system, but certain gaps still persist in the system. Identify those gaps and suggest remedial measures to strengthen rural healthcare system. Over here, we are talking about rural healthcare specifically. Government initiated National Rural Health Mission, which is a sub-mission of National Health Mission, where there are various initiatives by government to ensure multiple issues with respect to rural health are taken care of. You can also talk about certain data. You can either talk about lack of accessibility or poverty as well. We have seen similar kind of poverty data for rural in the beginning of the first question. You can use similar kind of data as well. You can see that this data can also be cited for the introduction of question number 2. So that's it for the introduction. Let's see the body. Firstly, we will be identifying the gaps, then we'll be talking about the measures. So gaps in rural health services. The very first is shortage of infrastructure. We have seen lots and lots of gap with respect to infrastructure, as in we do not have sufficient primary health care center or community health care centers. So such kind of basic infrastructure is also missing. Apart from that, as we have seen that how rural areas are located at remote locations, we also have issues with respect to connectivity. So that kind of infrastructure is also missing. Apart from that, we have seen lack of personnel, as in one of the report by rural health statistics in 2019-20, we saw that rural places are witnessing gap of 76% of specialists at health centers. So such kind of acute gap also impacts overall health scenario of rural places. We have also seen that more than 50,000 positions of doctors and nurses are vacant in rural places. So lack of personnel directly impacts the entire rural healthcare architecture. We have also seen how low spending by government via budgets is also impacting. We only have currently 1% of GDP allocated for healthcare, which should be probably more than 2.5 to 3%. We have also issue with respect to awareness deficit. We have seen that in COVID pandemic that rural population, they do not have much inclination to visit proper organized healthcare facilities due to multiple issues. One of them is awareness. There are also multiple social related issues like certain kind of stigma associated. So that kind of awareness deficit also impacts the rural healthcare infrastructure as well as the entire architecture. So now let us talk about in the body what kind of measures we can take to ensure that the rural health is supported. So remedial measures to strengthen rural health services. First, as we saw that there is lack of infrastructure, so we can definitely leverage technology over here through telemedicine, etc. So technology can be leveraged here to ensure there is proper access to healthcare services. Apart from that, accessing health related data of rural places will give us trends with respect to what kind of specific attention must be given to certain regions, so that there is lots of focused work regarding rural healthcare. Then we can talk about citizens' participation. As we witness through decentralization, we can empower citizens to directly participate in the policy making as well as in the implementation and monitoring process. So citizen participation can give us proper contextual feedback. Last is comprehensive healthcare management. As we saw that there is gap of 76% of doctors with respect to their specialization. Primary, secondary and tertiary must not be seen as separate units but must be integrated, and such kind of facility must be accessible to every rural population. So that those are the measures we can write in the answer. Now let us see the conclusion. Over here you can straightforward add SDG 3, which is related to health. Apart from that, you can also talk about certain sub-missions in National Rural Health Mission, different schemes, different yojanas, right? So you can add those schemes over here and talk about how exactly certain kind of amalgamation, integration of those schemes can give a very holistic development to a rural health care. Now let us see the model answer and understand how can we exactly help get help with respect to writing answers. You can talk about in the introduction about National Rural Health Mission. You can give certain data points to substantiate your introduction. Then you can talk about certain gaps, issues, give keyword, substantiate and give example. Similarly, you can talk about measures, you can give keyword, argument and substantiation. In the conclusion, you can talk about that how it needs certain mission, definitely needs certain kind of various provisions like financial support and all, and thus bridge the gap of rural healthcare. So this is question number 2. Now let's go to question number 3. Let's read the question number 3 together. Indo-Canada ties have grown from mid-20th century diplomacy to a diverse 21st century partnership involving trade, tech and people. In light of recent development, analyze Indo-Canadian relations. So in the introduction, you have the opportunity to talk about how it has evolved. So you can talk about evolution of Indo-Canada ties post-independence till 1990s and so on at 21st century. In 1950s, we saw that Indo-Canadian ties started with a neutral ground, then we had common wealth association. Apart from that, support for UN was also something which was common to both. Then in 1980s, we saw how diaspora impacted India-Canada relationship. There was definitely a lot of support with respect to that. In 1990s, we saw LPG reforms, and because of that, trade relationship also augmented. And in 21st century, we saw multiple partnership through trade, technology and people. We can inculcate the same in the body 1. And as we are going to analyze, we can also talk about certain issues in body 2. Now let's see body 1. Some of the key sectors of cooperation. First is trade. Indo-Canada, in the previous year 2022, we witnessed around $8 billion of trade, and also India is 10th largest trading partner of Canada, right? So that's something you can talk in the trade. In science and technology, you have the opportunity to write how Indian private organization are investing over there, as well as Canada's organization are investing in India with respect to IT, artificial intelligence. And also you can talk about how ISRO is working with Canadian space agencies for multiple technological transfers and all. So that is something you can talk in science and technology. In people to people, you can talk about that almost 3% of Canada's population is of Indian origin. Apart from that, Canada is second highest country with of Sikh population, right? So that is something you can talk about in the people to people. In energy, you can talk about how there are certain agreements with respect to nuclear energy, uranium resource and all. So you can talk about that. In security and defense, you can talk about how Indian DRDO is working in collaboration with Canadian security and defense agencies for developing different defense and security related technologies. Also, you can talk about Indo-Pacific strategy, how both of the nation have certain common ground such as democratic setup in nature. So they have clear goals with respect to Indo-Pacific strategy as well. So these are the key sectors of cooperation. Now issues with respect to Indo-Canada relationship. We recently saw how Khalistani issue evolved and is one of the crucial weak point between Indo and Canada ties. So that is something you can write in the first point. In second point, there are certain trade hurdles as well with respect to agricultural export, import. There are certain regulatory standards that both of countries do not have common. Apart from that, there is also issue with respect to market access. So trade hurdles is also one of the point when you can talk about issues. Apart from that, you can also talk about there are certain investment treaties or free trade agreements that India and Canada have not signed. So that is something you can mention in the trade hurdles. Then third point is about close relationship with China. China is Canada's second largest trading partner. So that definitely changes its equation with India. Apart from that, also there is high amount of student exchange. There are lots of Chinese students, they are studying in Canada, so that also definitely gives them a certain kind of influence. So close relationship with China also impacts Indo-Canada relationship. So these are the challenges that you can write in issues in Indo-Canada relationship. In the conclusion, you can either talk about way ahead, how India and Canada must solve their issue bilaterally and ensure whatever trade barriers they are sorted away with free trade agreements or bilateral trade investments agreement and all. Apart from that, also dehyphenate political issues and diplomatic relationship. So that way Indo-Canada relationship can flourish and thus realize a win-win situation. So that's question number 3. Let's see model answer of question number 3. In the introduction, you can talk about the evolution of Indo-Canada relationship. Then you can talk about some of the key sectors of cooperation. You can talk about different dimensions, give the argument and substantiate with data. Similarly, you can talk about different issues, give the right keyword, the argument and the substantiation, and in the conclusion you can talk about dehyphenation, you can talk about trade agreement and all. So that's it for today's session. Thank you very much.